II missile lifts from its pad. This flight down the South Atlantic target range makes history. This is the booster that will carry the Gemini space vehicle on the nation's next manned spaceflight program. What makes this test stand as a milestone is a camera that is mounted on the second stage of the booster. It has been designed to record spectacular close-ups.
So after a 2-week hiatus, Carolyn and I are back in action. This time we're heading to Huntsville, Alabama, particularly the U.S. Space and Rocket Center or the Redstone Arsenal. Personally, I'm trying to see if I'm too old to get into space camp. I might need to lose a few pounds. I'm not really sure how their basic training works. Anyway, you remember space camp, right? Because there was this one time at space camp that this robot malfunctioned and launched kids into space. I mean, there were like kids in space orbiting the planet. Really scary. Point is kids, if you try real hard enough and program robots as hard as you can, they might be able to launch you into space. But you know, launching kids into space is not what this video is all about, but it is about space, sort of. I mean, it's really about space exploration and asking some pretty important questions, like, is space exploration really that important? And by important, I mean, is it worth our tax dollars? Is it worth lives being lost? I mean, after all, how important is it to be able to get to Mars? On a side note, I want to thank everyone for watching our video about Opryland. We got a lot of great feedback about that video, and a special thanks to my personal best friend, Ken Hartley. He is a friend and advisor to A Nose for Life. And Ken, thank you so very much for your help with that video. You really gave it a boost, and I welcome all of you to watch that video if you haven't watched it already. At the end of this video, it's a pretty funny video, and it's interesting too. If you watch that video, you remember me talking about traffic on I-24 from Chattanooga to Nashville. And it may sound crazy, but in order to get to Huntsville, we have to travel on I-24 for a few miles in order to get to Huntsville. And guess what? There's a traffic jam. Imagine that. So here's something for anyone in the comment section related to I-24 traffic before we even get into the topic of our video. Can anyone explain to me why I-24 around Chattanooga has been a mess? It's always been a mess since I was a little kid, and why hasn't it gotten any better? Put it in the comments below.
You know, I've made other videos about space and NASA, and they didn't get too far. Well, what I mean is that not too many people watch those videos. I think it's because I didn't include anything about the Earth being flat, or CERN, or time travelers coming back to tell their story. Look, I'll be the first to admit, I need to do a better job making thumbnails and improving my clickbait. And though this may cost me a few viewers, let me just say that this video is not a conspiracy theory video, but then again, it may be taken that way if you don't know a lot about the Cold War and the space race.
Don't tell me they're not spying on us in the woods and in the water. I'm telling you, NASA can see you everywhere you are, because it's NASA.
But even if you don't know a lot about the space race between the United States and the former Soviet Union, you'll still learn a lot about a great place to visit in Huntsville, Alabama.
Behind me here are models of future space warriors here in Huntsville. This is what our future space, I'm just kidding. Actually, this is really cool. It's dedicated to the men and women who have served in the United States Armed Forces, and so it's really cool. So we made it here to Huntsville, Alabama, to the Space Center, and it's really cool, but we have to go to the bathroom, so it's like priorities here. We got to find a bathroom and see what's going on, and you know, and if you come to Alabama like anytime after March, usually the way it's hot. I just want to warn you now. Hot, just think hot. That's all I'm gonna say. So I'm like really excited because this is the home of space camp, and maybe I can get some answers about those kids that were launched accidentally in space and how that happened, and the cover-up's insane, but everybody's pretty closed-mouthed and nobody really wants to talk about it. Maybe we can get some deeper answers too, like that whole flat earth conspiracy or aliens. This is where we'll get our information.
If you're a space nerd like I am, what I'm about to say is going to sound a little sacrilegious. But the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama is a graveyard for rockets and space capsules and so on. If you've ever wanted to see a space shuttle up close or one of the Apollo rockets and other NASA and military space stuff, well, this is a great place to visit. In fact, I bet it's the main reason many adults my age and older do visit, because getting to space meant something different for my generation and the generation before me.
Hey, do you remember that documentary that they made way back in the 80s? I think Clint Eastwood was in it, and he stole that Russian jet where like his thoughts could control where the missiles were going. Do you remember that movie, something? I don't know. Well, I think this is it behind me. It's pretty cool. Clint Eastwood. Just saying.
But before we get started, if you're a returning follower or subscriber to this channel, welcome back. And I'm very grateful that you're watching this video. Thank you for helping us grow this channel by clicking the like button and sharing this video on all of your social media platforms. We make these videos just for you. Now, maybe this isn't your first time to our channel, but you're not a subscriber. Well, I want to invite you to subscribe and click that little bell for notifications. Subscribing or following this channel with notifications is how we're able to continue making video content. So I really hope you'll consider subscribing today. If you're new to A Nose for Life, I'm extremely thankful that you're giving our video content a chance. We're a little different. Some would even say a little hokey or cheesy, and we're okay with that. Again, welcome. And for anyone watching this video, remember this is a conversation, so your opinion is welcome in the comments section. So let's begin by talking about NASA, because back in the day, NASA meant a lot more to the American public than it does now. It was more than just climate monitoring. Not that climate monitoring is a bad thing, and it was more than launching and maintaining communication satellites, though we're all thankful for the age of communication in which we live that was made possible by NASA. But getting humans to and surviving in space was a test of American ingenuity and accepting an enormous challenge just a decade after World War II. The truth is that the American space program was sort of an inside joke until 1957. And that's when we got served.
It's called Sputnik.
CBS Television presents a special report on Sputnik 1, the Soviet space satellite. Douglas Edwards reporting. Until 2 days ago, that sound had never been heard on this earth. Suddenly, it has become as much a part of 20th century life as the whir of your vacuum cleaner. It's a report from man's farthest frontier, the radio signal transmitted by the Soviet Sputnik, the first man-made satellite as it passed over New York earlier today.
Sputnik wasn't much bigger than a basketball, but it was the point, and not just any point, but an explanation point. The potential to launch a missile from one continent and land in another continent meant that the Soviet Union no longer needed airplanes or jets to deliver nuclear weapons to American soil. It meant that the Soviet Union had a staggering strategic advantage over the United States.
And there's an entire site dedicated to Space Camp and those heroic children who flew the space shuttle. And it was amazing because a robot launched them up there, an evil robot launched them up there, and this tells their story. It commemorates the story of how these heroic children flew the space shuttle. It's simply amazing.
Bill, that was just a movie.
Everybody's telling me that it was a movie, that it really didn't happen, but I remember it happened. I don't know if it's the Mandela effect. I don't know what's going on.
It's not the Mandela effect. Everybody's trying to tell you, including me, it was just a movie, honey. Don't you remember the
It's not
actress
just a
in
movie.
it?
I was
She
emotionally.
also played in Back to the Future. Same actress, different movie.
Are you telling
It's
me
a movie?
you're telling me Back to the Future was real then?
No, I'm not telling you Back to the Future was real. Oh my gosh.
Don't tell me they didn't know we were coming. They even have our drinks in the icebox waiting on us that say Carolyn and Bill because they knew we were coming. I'm telling you, man, NASA is controlled by the Illuminati. I'm going to show you some more evidence I found while I'm in here.
Today, Sputnik is celebrated as a milestone for space exploration, and it is. And thinking of Sputnik in a glamorous, pioneering way is easier to digest than the whole story. The reality is that Sputnik launches the space race between the United States of America and the former Soviet Union. Despite the fact that during the same time period, rock and roll was born and the American economy is booming, the global community faces the fact that global annihilation is very possible. In fact, many leaders in the scientific community believed that global nuclear war wasn't just possible, but probable. And some of the military leaders in the US and the Soviet Union believed it would be best to strike first to have the strategic advantage over the other and hope the Earth is still habitable after the last bomb explodes. If we're being honest about history, the space race was never really about space. It was about war. Developing rockets that can reach the stars was a byproduct of the real goal both nations began achieving successfully, not just launching rockets to the stars, but launching rockets with nuclear warheads to your enemy's backyard. When we think about the space race, we have to remove nostalgia, as hard as that is, even for me, because I love studying the early days of the space race. But the space race is actually the biggest militaristic technological development on a global scale in the history of humanity. We prefer to remember astronauts and scientists for their amazing achievements during this time period. But the money that was poured into NASA, not to mention the military-industrial complex, was to win an unwinnable war. But the byproduct of this draconian militaristic investment advanced civilization faster than any other time in our history. And while that last sentence is still being debated, it's a really dumb debate. Look at the device on which you are watching this video and think about the information you can access. Whether it's the camera I use to record this video or the computer or phone you're using to watch this video, not to mention the medical devices that are used to save lives every day, the fastest and most profitable advances in history began happening October 4th, 1957, after the launching of Sputnik. And 12 years later, we were on the moon.
The Space Museum. I'm not sure if the museum is actually in space or not. It seems like that would be a little expensive, and we didn't pay a great deal of money to get in here. Again, this is another one of those attractions that if you live within 3-4 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour, you've got to check it out because it's not going to break your bank. You're looking at gas money, lunch, and then about 25 bucks to get in, and it's worth your time. Great IMAX here too. This is not your normal IMAX, I assure you. Now, obviously, I can't film during the movie. This is pretty cool. So you have like these G-force rides. One of them goes around and around. I did that one without having a heart attack this time. The next one I'm doing is this one that goes up and down and up and down, and it's kind of scary looking, but I've got to try it. I mean, it looks really cool. I want to be an astronaut. I want to go to space camp. I'm scared. Section is dedicated to Wernher von Braun, the father, I guess, of the modern space program. He has a really interesting quote on his tombstone that I'll show you here. But his early career in rocket making was for Nazi Germany. But I think he finished well.
Now, as a Christian, I believe that forgiveness for anything, or salvation, is available through Jesus Christ. I mention this for two reasons. One, because I'm a Christian, and it's a part of my faith to tell you and everyone that no matter what you've done in your past or what you're doing right now, you can be forgiven by accepting Jesus Christ as your Savior. Now, if you're not a Christian and you feel triggered because I actually mentioned my faith on a YouTube channel about space, come on, get over it. I'm a huge Philip DeFranco fan, and he's an atheist, and he mentions his atheism all the time, and I don't cry about it because he's respectful to Christians, and I'm respectful, courteous, and yes, friends with people who don't share my faith. So stick around and don't get all weird because I mentioned my faith. On the other hand, if you aren't a Christian and you are interested in learning about forgiveness, send me a message and let's talk. The second reason I mention forgiveness is available for anyone because that's exactly what Wernher von Braun received from Americans after World War II. See, during World War II, von Braun worked for the Nazis and developed the German V-2 rocket that killed thousands of people and caused billions of dollars in damage. Some could even argue that he is, or rather was, a war criminal. During the final days of World War II, Project Paperclip was put into action. Project Paperclip was a top-secret project to acquire German scientists to help the U.S. in an upcoming possible war with the Soviet Union that many experts at the time saw as inevitable. The Soviets had their own version of Project Paperclip. In an odd way, Project Paperclip for both the U.S. and the Soviet Union was like the NFL drafting of German scientists. Project Paperclip and everything attached is really interesting, so I'll put a link in the description. Hey, did you get that? See what I did there? Attached, paperclip. Anyway, Wernher von Braun was a part of Project Paperclip and became an American scientist. As a newly recruited American, and even before 1957, Wernher von Braun is trying his very best to sell the American public on building rockets for missions to space. But here's the funny thing, no one is really listening with their checkbook. He's on television all the time talking about rockets, trips to the moon, and even space stations, but he's still not getting the political financial backing that a space program actually needs. Make no mistake, the public was extremely interested, and people like Walt Disney advanced Braun's vision of space travel. But Washington was not willing to raise the money because that meant raising taxes, and that's never popular. That is, until October 4th, 1957. Not until Sputnik. And that's when Wernher von Braun became the great German-American hero that's going to help us defeat the Soviets in space. Not everyone trusted Braun and his fellow German scientists who were also former Nazis. While it's true that many Germans were practically forced to join the Nazi Party before and during World War II, the fact remains that many Germans refused to do so, and they had the courage and the willingness to pay the price for their refusal. The truth is that whatever the reason, Braun was a former Nazi. But after Sputnik, Americans were pretty scared. Seriously, a great fear spread throughout the country after the successful launch of Sputnik. Sputnik had the whole country convinced we were in pretty big trouble. And objectively, it seems that the U.S. government and the public at large had good reason to be scared. At the time, we were barely getting a rocket off the ground, and we were a long way from launching an actual satellite at the rate we were going. And getting a person into space? Forget about it. With the current budget we had for rocket development at the time, it would have taken 50 years to get that far. For a moment, it was as if the Soviets had already won the Cold War. We needed a hero. And we had plenty of heroes, but what we really needed was a nerd hero. You know, the smartest guy in the room, and that happened to be Wernher von Braun, who had been waiting for this kind of a moment his entire life. It's interesting to note that Sputnik's success changed America more than it enriched the former Soviet Union that launched the first satellite. Sputnik was a game changer for American policymakers, and it was a chance for Braun to redeem himself in the eyes of the public. What I find so interesting about Wernher von Braun is he was really sold out to the American cause. After all, at this point, he was an American. No one knows what's inside an individual's heart, mind, or soul, so we don't know if von Braun contributed his very best because he believed in the American dream and hated communism, or if he simply loved making rockets. There is a great deal of evidence, though, that supports either legacy. But the overwhelming evidence suggests that Wernher von Braun was an extremely intelligent but complicated human being that didn't just contribute to the American space program, but without von Braun, there is no American space program. And yet, Wernher von Braun was a man with a horrible past that he denounced, and a confessing Christian who believed in intelligent design. Think about that for just a moment. The scientist with a horrible past who made things like the Hubble telescope or the ISS even imaginable believed in God, and that we were surrounded with the evidence of God's creative work. I've added a link about Wernher von Braun in the description.
Well, if you've ever made any kind of a mistake in life and you'd like to turn it around, let Wernher von Braun be a great inspiration to you. If you like vintage space stuff, like 1950s and 1960s space stuff, one of the best YouTube channels out there is called Vintage Space. Amy at Vintage Space. I don't always agree with Amy and some of her ideas and philosophy about where the space program is heading and whatnot, but I'm going to tell you, it's the best space YouTube program out there. It's up there with SciShow. If you like SciShow, of course you will love Vintage Space. It is amazing. So check it out, and if you go there, tell her Bill sent you. Again, that's Amy at Vintage Space. She is an expert when it comes to 1950s and 1960s and 70s stuff. She's not a big space shuttle fan, neither am I, and she'll tell you all about it, but her videos are absolutely amazing. Check it out. The link, by the way, is of course in the description below. I think NASA is hurting for inventors and engineers. They have this sign behind me that says, "What would you invent?" Well, I'm going to do my part as an American citizen and try to help them invent what we need. There's a lot of money at stake with my invention, so I can't actually give you these details about what I'm inventing, but I will show you the beginning. Saturn V here is the rocket that got us to the moon. It's a part of the Apollo mission, and it is impressive. When you stand underneath it and look up, it is crazy. So whether it's at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida or here in Huntsville, I'm always amazed by the space shuttle.
I've made a lot of other videos about NASA, and I admit I'm pretty hard on the American Space Agency. I don't pull too many punches. Right or wrong, I feel like I've earned the right to voice my opinion concerning NASA, considering I've spent the past 30 years defending NASA to my friends who are a lot more conservative than I am, and they would rather see NASA's budget cut to shreds. The truth is very simple. The U.S. won the space race because we were marching to the drums of war. No war drums, lower budget. I don't like it, but it's a fact, and I've learned to accept it. Sort of. But I'd love to see NASA's budget increase considerably. but even I would rather see NASA focused on a big mission than chasing asteroids. And as much as I love our satellite trips to Saturn, Jupiter, and yes, planet Pluto and beyond, it's time to focus our time, energy, and resources placing boots on Martian soil. Furthermore, NASA tends to lean in the political direction where they can find political money, like studying climate change, which is important to a lot of people, including myself. But feel free to fact check me on this. NASA wasn't exactly the first to jump on the climate change bandwagon. NASA dove into that arena for political reasons and political dollars, and I'm not even saying NASA was wrong for that, but it's not what Wernher von Braun had in mind for the agency. Exploration is what he had in mind, and the economic and humanitarian byproducts that come with it. Throughout all of history, developing technological advances and exploration of any kind benefits humanity greatly over a long period of time. I feel for NASA, I really do. They have to roll with the punches through every administration change that comes their way, but this is all the more reason their priority should be getting humans to Mars. Let's consider the budget for our armed forces. It's enormous, and I'm not going to get too deep into that discussion in this video. I served honorably in the U.S. military, and hooray for the red, white, and blue, and fireworks, apple pie, and hot dogs too. But as I stated earlier in this video, the U.S. military and other U.S. agencies launch satellites and other secret missions to space all the time. NASA could use some of that money. I mean, I get it, we need military intelligence. But from what I can tell from the news, both mainstream and alternative, the U.S. is able to watch everything, everywhere, even in our own country. I mean, our entire planet is becoming so me-centered that we forget what it's like to sacrifice for the sake of achievement. It's once again time to split infinitives and to go boldly where no one has gone before. Why? Well, no one explains this better than President John Kennedy.
Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Good Lord, ride all the way. Godspeed, John Glenn.
Silent scan. Silent scan. Silent scan. Silent scan. Silent.